Today I'm going over a brand new poll released by Marquette University Law School, which shows that Kamala Harris has a 4-point lead over Donald Trump in the state of Wisconsin in this brand new poll. So just going over it, Kamala Harris's 4-point lead over Donald Trump is in the article the biggest Democratic lead there has been for president in 5 Wisconsin polls conducted by Marquette Law School since last year. The new Wisconsin survey, which was taken between October 28th to September 5th, was completed before Tuesday's presidential debate. It has some underlying changes in public opinion and is a small edge for Harris carved out. It also has shown the Democratic voters have taken over Republican voters in terms of enthusiasm for voting in this election cycle in this poll. The poll also finds that Kamala Harris is now more popular than President Joe Biden when he was the nominee back in June and before. Harris scores better than Biden on several key issues and personal qualities in this poll. Also, her choice for running mate Tim Walz is more approved of than Trump's choice for running mate J.D. Vance. But with all that said, the article says about the poll that it is still a 4-point Harris lead, 52% to 48% among likely voters, and does have some caveats. The article briefly mentions the Democratic National Convention, and that the main point here is, and of course, this poll does not tell us who's going to carry Wisconsin in November. No survey can do that in such a close state. This most concrete guide to where Wisconsin's going to end up is the state's last 2 presidential contests, with Trump on the ballot in both. Wisconsin was decided by less than a percentage point each time. So I'm going to do just a little bit of a polling exercise after I go over this article that shows those 2 polls and election results and just echo that as well. But that is true. Just because Harris is up by 4 in this poll does not mean she's a lock to win this election, nor does it mean Trump is a lock to win this state. It's going to be very, very close and probably under 1 percentage point yet again, as the article mentions. Now we're just going to go into more of the weeds of the poll itself. Harris is some of the results of the poll compared to Marquette's June poll, which was the last one conducted for Biden withdrew from the race after disastrous performance about his age. Democrats have gone from being the least enthusiastic of the 2 parties in Wisconsin to now the most enthusiastic. From a poll from last fall, Democrats faced a double-digit enthusiasm gap. In June, only 40% of Democrats were very enthusiastic to vote, and Republicans had 57%. The gap narrowed in Marquette's July poll, and now in the poll, Democrats are the ones with the enthusiasm edge, with 72% of Democratic voters saying they're enthusiastic to vote, only 63% for the Republicans. That is a shift of 17-point GOP advantage to a 9-point Democratic advantage in about 2.5 months, which is definitely a positive sign for why Harris has been leading in the polls in the state of Wisconsin, at least, is that there's more enthusiasm now on her side. Harris is also more popular than Biden in the state of Wisconsin, where Biden was viewed by 40% favorably to 57% unfavorably. In the new poll, Harris is viewed at 47% favorable to unfavorable 51%. And she is underperformed still by 4 points. But why does that matter? Because Donald Trump is viewed at 43% favorable to 56% unfavorable. So even though both candidates are underwater, at least according to this poll, Harris is slightly more approved of than Trump is. And as the article also mentions, this is why I love this article so much, because it really goes into a lot of key details about these polling statistics. An edge in popularity does not necessarily translate to a voting edge, but when Biden beat Trump in 2020, he was the personally more popular of the 2. That Biden advantage disappeared in this election cycle, not because Trump had gained in popularity, but because Biden had declined. The dynamic has now shifted again, with Harris enjoying a better favorability rating than Trump. As I mentioned, Tim Walz is more popular than J.D. Vance, according to this poll. Walz is viewed favorably by 43% of registered voters in Wisconsin, and unfavorably by 37%. Vance is viewed 37% as favorable and unfavorable by 47%, so it's almost inverse completely. Of course, running mates don't really play a drastic role in the elections usually, but still it's an advantage for Harris and Walz in this scenario. Harris has actually made Trump's lead on the economy, immigration, and Gaza shorter than it has been. Trump still holds the lead on the economy, but in June, 52% of registered voters in Wisconsin said Trump would do a better job in the economy, and Biden had 34%. Now it's Trump at 50% and Harris at 42%. So Trump's support back from Biden's poll in June has gone down by 2, whereas Harris has gone up by, 8 points? By 8 percentage points on this. Trump's edge on the immigration and the war in Gaza is smaller against Harris than it was on Biden as well. So this just shows that Harris is putting some inroads into this as well. And also, Kamala Harris has shifted the age issue to a GOP liability, where 76% of voters back in June thought Biden was too old, 53% thought Trump was too old. And the new poll, share of voters think Trump is too old, has risen to 59%. That's up 6% back from June. And only 15% think Harris is too old. In closing for the article, it says, in many respects, perceptions of Trump haven't really changed very much in the last 3 months, but perceptions of Harris are more positive than they were of Biden. That doesn't mean she'll win Wisconsin, but it certainly suggests that she went into Tuesday's debate in a stronger position in Wisconsin than Biden was in, and quite possibly a stronger position than Trump. This was written by Craig Gilbert. He provides Wisconsin political analysis as a fellow for Marquette University Law School. Okay, so that was the article. Now I'm going to just transition really quick to Real Clear Politics and look at the poll itself. So the poll has 738 likely voters with a margin of error of 4.7%. So even though Harris is up in this poll by 4%, it is with noting that it's still within the 4.7% margin of error. And the reason I think it's such a high margin of error is because it's a lower sample size of 738. Typically, the bigger the sample size, the smaller margin of error, because it's more representative of the American population. So the small sample size could be a potential reason why it's a 4-point race. Currently in the polling average right now, it is plus 1.8 for Kamala Harris, so the Marquette poll certainly is not exactly lined up with what the average is. Aside from the Bloomberg poll that had this race is up 8, Marquette is the second biggest number for Harris. Most CBS had Harris up 2. Trafalgar, The Hill had Trump up 1, and Rasmussen had Harris up 1. American Greatness had it at a tie. So Marquette is certainly the biggest. I don't want to call it an outlier because I'm not sure if that's necessarily the most accurate term, but it's the biggest margin of victory for Harris. So what are some things that I personally am taking away from this poll? As the article mentioned, yes, Harris is up in this poll by 4 points, but seeing as the margin of error is 4.7%, I don't think this is necessarily saying Harris is definitely going to win the state of Wisconsin. I don't think that's what that says. What this poll does confirm, though, is what we've seen for the last few weeks, which is Kamala Harris has taken a lead in Wisconsin and routinely held about a 1 to 2 point lead in the polling average since she has done that. And, I mean, look, we're not going to know until Election Day, obviously. Polls have a very streaky history in Wisconsin, and I'll show you what I mean by that. We're back in 2020. The polling average had Biden plus 6.7. The election result was only 0.7. Marquette, for its part, had Biden plus 5. It was about 5 points less than what the margin ended up being. Looking back in 2016, the RCP average had Clinton up 6.5. Trump at 0.7 was the actual margin. Marquette had Clinton up plus 6. So both times Marquette definitely overperformed for the Democratic candidate in the polls compared to the actual result that happened both times. But when you look at the margins here, just take a look. Marquette had 46% for Clinton, and she got 46.5% in the election. Okay, now let's look at Marquette here. It has Biden at 48%, and the final result had Biden at 49.6%. So the Democratic percentage that Marquette usually guesses, at least in 2016 and 2020, was not that far off. What it missed both times was Trump's percentage. Trump had 43, and he ended up with 48.9 on Election Day, and obviously Trump had 40 in the poll, 40 in the polls, and Trump ended up with 47.2. So how that translates to now is anyone's guess, but it seems at 52-48, it's not underestimating Trump's support at like 40 or 42% or something like that again. Now it's at 48%. So that could be a sign that Marquette, whatever the problem was with their poll that had Trump in the such low 40s, it has corrected that issue. So maybe that 6-point polling jump won't happen again in 2024. Or maybe they didn't account for that and it might happen again. Who's to say? We're going to have to wait and see. But nonetheless, I mean, the poll's a good sign for Harris that she's up by 4. Just also for the sake of argument, I'm going to show one more poll here from 2022, the Wisconsin Senate race, where Marquette had Ron Johnson at 50% and Mandela Barnes had 48%. And on election day, Johnson ended up at 50.4, Barnes had 49.4. I wanted to show this just to play devil's advocate a little bit because this poll was actually in the Senate race was actually pretty accurate. So maybe they corrected some things from 2020 into 2022 that had the poll be more accurate. That could be possible. And again, 50 to 48 makes a lot more sense because we know that, like we saw in 2020, we know Trump's going to get more than 43% in Wisconsin. We know that for a fact. In 2024, we look at, is Trump going to get 48% in Wisconsin in 2024? Probably. Could he get more than that? Sure. But I think it seemed to have corrected for the low 40s%. So that's just something to note. But overall, I think this poll shows that Wisconsin is still very, very close. This poll suggests that Harris does have a 4-point lead, and that's nothing to scoff at, but it is worth noting it's within the margin of error with a smaller sample size. So I think the main takeaway from this one is Harris has a lead in Wisconsin, but Democrats shouldn't get too over the moon about it, too happy about it, because it is within the margin of error. And as the article mentioned, Wisconsin's been under 1 point in 2020 and 2016, and I expect 2024 will probably be similar. So that'll do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to click like, subscribe, share with your friends and family. Stay tuned as I'll be posting at least one video a day leading up to Election Day every single day, so please stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.